What is up, everybody? Welcome to Dharma Time here on WPSN99.com. I am your host, as always, the Dharma Guy, with, let me bring him up here, the Noob Doctor. What's up, man?
What's up, brother? How you doing?
Hot. Hot, man. I think,
Yeah, man.
I think we need to take a moment to acknowledge the heat, man. I don't know where you guys are all watching this from. I know I am in Orlando. He is in New Smyrna Beach, both of which are located in Florida, or as I like to say, on the sun. Dude, it is
Might as
hot,
well.
man. I went out. I had to go train a client this morning, and I was in an air-conditioned house, and I walked from my front door to the door of my truck, just long enough to get the key in and get into said truck with the AC on, and I started to sweat. Like literally, in those like that 12 feet caused me to sweat. It is
That's offensive, man. You need to cancel the sun.
good segue. I like that, man. But before we cancel the sun, let me first tell everybody why we're here. We are the Problem Solving Network, so we do our best to stream solutions, right? We try to solve problems. And the way we do that is, as you see behind him, he is the founder, I'm the president of the Now Matters More Foundation, and one of the ways that we like to help people is trying to get them the help that they need for drug and alcohol addiction. That comes in many forms. It comes in, and obviously we vet programs. We direct people where they need to go. It doesn't matter where you're currently at watching this. If you need help, call us at 833 Now Matters. That's 833 Now Matters. Or you can go to nowmattersmore.org and you can see about who we are, what we do. You can fill out an application, or you can hit that little donate button and it shows your support that way. And that does help us do what we do. And so let's get started, I guess. Let's just jump right in it, man.
Why not?
So, all right. So for those of you who have been living under a rock,
Uh-oh.
who don't know that we are in a culture at the moment that seems to cherish outing people and holding people accountable in their own definition of accountable. And it's got a term, and the term is called cancel culture. And so, cancel culture is essentially, I think, Lou, you read it earlier, and somebody defined it as essentially public shaming. Really, is
Yeah.
kind of what it boils down to.
Yeah.
And I think that's the best definition I've heard of it.
Yeah. It's like utilizing your social media platform to publicly shame
Yeah,
somebody for doing something that you feel is no longer valid or not valid or unnecessary.
yeah. And sometimes this behavior is illegal. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's universally unacceptable. Sometimes
Right.
there's different pockets who agree or don't agree.
Right.
It's essentially those with the loudest voice, or in this case, the most followers, typically are the ones that get heard the most. And it is essentially public shaming. It is, hey, you said or did something that we find offensive or does not coincide with what we feel to be the public stance on things. So now we're going to ridicule you, humiliate you, shame you, essentially bully you, and try to make you disappear. If if you receive any sort of payment from public funds or from sponsorships, we're going to try to get rid of those. We're going to try to attack your livelihood. We're going to try to basically make you go away. Is what cancel
It's like a
culture.
modern day boycott. A modern day
Yeah,
boycott with a lot of money.
I prefer to call it a lynch mob with pitchforks and torches chasing the person out of the village.
If you put that with boycott together, that's exactly what you have.
Yeah, that's what it feels like to me. And we have a very long history, right? Not even in America, but just as human beings. We have a very long history of mob-like behavior and the crazy townspeople running somebody out.
So let's start with that. Yeah, what are some of the images that you get in your mind when you
The
think
first
of?
one that pops into my head, and I was talking to my wife earlier about it, is the Salem witch trials.
Yeah,
And essentially that was what was I think it was Massachusetts, I believe. I could be wrong. But
yeah,
it was up that in that general area. Back in the day, they had this weird kind of thought that they thought there was a lot of witches around and they were horrible and they were going to hurt you and whatever. And
right.
so all it would essentially take is somebody to say, "Hey, that person's a witch." And if I haven't had history class in quite some time, but if my memory serves me, essentially what they would do then is if you were thought to be of a witch, they had no real way of testing if you're a witch. So they basically thought if we burn you and you die, then you weren't a witch. If you do die, oops, I guess you weren't a witch. Not exactly the best thought out plan, I guess,
Right.
but that seems to be the apparatus they use to test. And obviously, they never found a non witch. They all burned and died. So,
Well, damn.
yeah, you would think after like the third or fourth one, they start to realize maybe we should rethink our methodology here. But
Mm.
and it seemed like a really good way to get rid of somebody you didn't like, right? Just call them a witch.
Yeah.
Because at that point, it was their burden to prove that they weren't, I guess. But
Hmm.
seems a little drastic to me, I guess. But who am I to judge at those times? I'm trying to think of other ones that I know.
Well, the one I think of is Nazi Germany.
Yeah,
I feel like, Hitler sort of identified Jews to be a certain type of way, their
right.
personality, their who they were, what their intent was, and he kind of explained it in such a way that created a fever
Yeah,
in a whole crowd backing up whatever he did.
yeah,
So to me, that's a strong example of what we're experiencing right now in a cancel culture where everybody automatically thought, yeah, 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 they got to be gone. They're wrong. They're wrong. They shouldn't exist.
yeah.
They don't deserve to live. Uh, and killed them and got
Yeah.
rid of a lot
So
of them. 8 million of them.
it's a lot of them.
Yeah.
All that's to basically say that this idea of cancel culture, this idea of kind of mobbing together against a common enemy is not a new thing for us, right? I mean, they even teach it. The other thing that I think of is, with our kids, right? Like my kids will watch these cartoons and stuff like that,
Mhm.
and they have example of those in cinematography, right? Like as an adult, Frankenstein is obviously a pretty big one. But for my little kids, like Beauty and the Beast, right? If you're unfamiliar with Beauty and the Beast, I don't know what to tell you, but I will briefly give you an interaction. But
I'm an in between generation of that. I didn't have kids yet,
right,
and I was already too old to know, so I didn't see it actually.
really, but
Yeah,
they've even had like adult versions of it, like on a show.
I don't watch that channel.
Well,
My
Beauty
mother
and the
raised me
Beast is
different.
essentially, I think her name was Belle. She, went out into the woods, got lost, was found by the Beast, which is essentially a prince who was cursed to look like a beast until I want to say he found true love. And then the townspeople kind of didn't like the Beast guy. They thought he was dangerous or whatever. This is egged on, of course, by another gentleman in the town that wanted to date Belle or whatever. But the main point was they all band together to go attack this beast, not knowing that he was a prince who was cursed.
Huh.
They found out at the end once Belle and him kind of kissed and fell in love. He turned back into his regular form, and then all the townspeople all live happily ever after. Completely forgetting, hey, you guys were all just getting ready to kill me. But my point being is they even have like cartoons to teach children, hey, this isn't right because you're supposed to walk away from that show feeling like, hey, maybe I shouldn't,
Right.
judge people that way or oust them. Frankenstein, in theory, that was the moral of the story, right? Frankenstein was a good monster. Actually, Frankenstein was the doctor, but his Frankenstein's monster was a good one. He was just misunderstood or what have you. And so it doesn't seem to have worked, right? Like all these life lessons, and even if you look back in history, none of them really worked, right? They all seem to kind of go badly.
Well, yeah, we just mentioned how many different events in history
Yeah,
that actually got a lot of people killed
yeah,
because of the same
yeah,
ideology.
and it
But
didn't work.
now you're bringing up life lessons like you just said, don't judge a book by its cover. That's not what's being taught right now.
No,
Um, Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. That's not being taught right
no,
now.
not at all.
Um, we all live in, don't throw stones.
If you
We
live in
all live
glass
in
houses,
glass
don't throw
houses.
stones. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah. That whole thing, that's not being taught right now.
turn the other cheek from a biblical
Yeah,
sense. That's not,
right,
Now it's basically just, they hit you, punch them back twice as hard, or
right.
completely end their careers.
Or if forgiveness. I mean, God, I don't want to jump into all of it too early, but I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah. There's no,
there's so many life lessons in regards to forgiveness. Like you should forgive somebody. You should, treat them kind because it's the right thing to do, not because they earn it or it's valuable or whatever. But all these life lessons about forgiving other people for what they did, give them an opportunity, listen,
yeah.
get to learn your enemy, understand your enemy. None of that stuff is being taught
Well, it
right now.
doesn't seem like the principles that I was raised with, or the principles that were ingrained in me, not only by my own mom, but just in popular culture around me,
Right.
It seems like those principles are gone. It seems like it's all negotiable now.
Right.
To whereas, like for instance, and we're going to be all over the place, so it
Right.
doesn't matter at this point. But I was raised with the belief that bullying was bad,
Yeah.
and it's just not. Right? Like in today's world, bullying's only bad if we don't agree with you. Right? Like if we agree with you,
Right.
you can bully all you want.
Right.
And
Right.
that's a new thing for me, right? Like
Right.
that's crazy to me that is so like, and they don't understand apparently the hypocrisy there. Nobody seems to see the irony that like bullying is bad, right? Like I've always said this to so many people, and that is bullying's all this stuff that they're doing. It's only fun when you're on the winning team.
Yeah.
And if you've got the numbers, then yeah, it seems great.
Hmm.
But what about if you don't have the numbers? And I'll give you here full transparency.
Right.
This has obviously been happening a lot in the media and the news and whatnot. And I do my best to try to kind of be aware of some of these things to come up with show topics because we try to stay relevant as to what we're all experiencing at the moment. And there's no shortage of situations where this is occurring, but there's certain hot button topics that I don't think it's appropriate for us to discuss right now as far as a whole show is concerned. So I'm constantly looking for other things that we can kind of, expose, I guess.
Right.
And so the one that really brought this show about to me was a classic example of this, and that is there was a relatively semi-popular YouTube content creator, right? And he plays video games and he streams stuff. He had 50, 60,000 subscribers. I mean, this is how he made his livelihood. This is what he does for a living. Relatively popular in that circle, right? I don't quite know him that much. I've seen a couple of his videos here and there.
Hmm.
Never really wasn't somebody that I related to, I guess. So I didn't watch
Right.
a lot of their videos. I never subscribed, but I know of that person.
Hmm.
But apparently, in the video game world, like things were rocked over this one weekend where a bunch of stuff came out. And one of the situations that came out of it was this girl who, I guess, she felt me too'd. She felt wronged in some sort of a way, decided to go out on a very public forum, Twitter, and write down her perspective of a certain evening that related to this gentleman.
Hmm.
So she gave her accounting of it, told everybody what she felt happened and why she thought it was such an atrocious evening, and then that's when things to me got weird, or went off the deep end, and that is most people who commented on this don't know who she is. Even the ones who know her just watch her videos. They don't know this person.
So she has a following as well.
A
Is what you're saying.
a little bit of a following. Much bigger now, but at the
Hmm.
time of this, wasn't a huge following.
Okay.
And the thing that kind of caught me off guard was a few things. Right. Number one, what caught me off guard was the fact that so many people collectively went to her aid. And I'm talking people that, to one hand, I expect the common everyday individual to chime in. I somewhat expect that. It's a little disheartening, but I expect it. But other YouTube creators were making videos addressing this and giving their opinion on it. And then developers of the video game that he kind of does a lot of videos on, they
Yeah.
even came out in support of this girl and things of that nature. So it was like universal that people came out and supported this girl and was trashing this other guy. So for me, that was the first sign of like, whoa, that's wow, okay. And mind you, when I read her account of things, it seemed let's see, there's nothing illegal took place, and the stuff that I did see, I felt it was very subjective. I felt that there could have been another perspective that was equally as valid than hers.
Right.
It wasn't something like he punched me in the face. That's pretty straight on. No, it was a lot of innuendo. It was a lot of interpretations, things of that nature. It was kind of gray. And then the next thing that kind of caught me off guard was I started seeing people who were trying to say, "Hey, we haven't heard from him yet. Like, we haven't heard his side of the story. We haven't heard him defend himself. Like, we need to slow down." And those people were then attacked. Those people were saying, "Hey, oh, you're victim blaming. You're not siding with women," and they were trashing these people. And then that was insane to me. It was like, wait a minute, these people are just trying to be reasonable. Like, hey, before we cancel somebody, before we ruin somebody's life,
Yeah.
let's get all the facts first, because there's always two sides to every story. And
Another
then,
life lesson, by the way. That's another
yeah,
life lesson. We used
yeah,
to hear it.
yeah.
There's two sides to every story.
And then the final thing that seemed to kind of to shock me, I guess, a little bit, or just disturb me a little bit, was he then came out with his own video where he went and addressed each and every single thing that was held against him
Uh-huh.
in detail with his own versions of proof. And these are all screenshots and DMs that they both had.
Oh, wow.
And the things that he said sounded pretty plausible to me as well. And so basically, you have a situation here where just two people are saying that they have their own interpretation of what happened. But what kind of shocked me was the fact that even when he did that, it seems like the majority of people did one of two things. There's obviously outliers, but the majority of people seem to either A, still believe the girl and run with her, and for whatever reason found her more believable than him. And mind you, they were the same people who already started out that way, so they just weren't moved. And then
Yeah.
the other people were basically telling this dude to, like, shut up. They were basically telling him, no, don't defend yourself. Nobody wants to hear from you. Go away. And that kind of shocked me because he wasn't even allowed to defend himself. So it's just crazy to me. And so that's what brought about today's show was I noticed that in multiple arenas, not just this one. But that one to me was one that I could use to where we can get it out without really, stirring the pot, so to speak.
Yeah. What's Marissa saying right there?
She says, I hate the court of public opinion. When something happens, it should be dealt with the proper authorities. It seems like people run to the cameras first just so the other person can get demonized to make the person who feels wrong feel better. Facts no longer matter.
Yeah. You can post it right there, so
Yeah, I'll put it up for a second.
yeah, that's that. Yeah,
I kind of
there's
agree.
a
I think
public
that's where we're
opinion
at.
thing. Yeah, we are in a place where everyone is their own writer, editor, investigative journalist, and back. And we always sound old when we say this, right? Back in the day.
But dude, it wasn't
right?
that long ago. We're talking like 6-7 years ago, even.
Well, there is a thing called investigative journalism, and we used to. A matter of fact, that the kind of idea was that investigative journalists and people that did tabloids were like sleazy reporters. They weren't like real reporters.
The
right?
National Enquirer was laughed at.
Yeah. So like Geraldo became famous, but being like a sleazy reporter, even though in his own head, Geraldo, as mainstream as he may be now, he started as this.
Oh, he was shunned.
Oh, dude, for a lot of weird. He would just like. Anyway, but the point is that they weren't viewed as like real journalists, even though they went to school to learn journalism, and people really wanted to know what they had to say. They really wanted to see the train wreck. They wanted to hear the train wreck.
Jerry Springer, man.
Jerry Springer. But you bring up a good name. Let's look at that. We don't look at Jerry Springer as a news anchor.
No.
But in today's world, Jerry Springer could very much be a news anchor, and people would buy him as a news anchor. The way we do news today, the way information is absorbed and taken today.
Yeah,
we would forget that he just is is a person that exploits some of our ugly.
Yeah, I think that the thing that kind of I think is problematic here, right, is from a spiritual perspective, anyways. We seem to have forgotten that we're all imperfect, that people make mistakes, people offend people, and it's okay to be offended, and it's okay to offend others. Like, it happens. It's a part of life. I'm not you, you're not me. I don't know how you're going to interpret it. You don't know what my hot buttons are. Things happen. What's not okay then is to just run with it like this person's a horrible human being because they made a mistake or they misread a situation. That to me is where we're starting to get a little crazy. Is people, because they get offended, they run with it to a degree that is pretty bad. Like in the example that I gave about the streamer guy, I mean, this guy lost all of his sponsors overnight, and he lost like I don't know, it was like 20, 30,000 subscribers over. I mean, that's his livelihood. That's how he makes his money. That's how he feeds his child. And I'm not saying I guess what I'm saying is it was too early for him to lose all that. I don't
Right,
know
right, right,
what happened. I wasn't there. It's a he
right.
said she said thing, and so all I'm saying is if I'm not saying that people like that shouldn't be held accountable, but if we're going to rob you of all of your livelihood, we better have some really good proof and some really good evidence, because what I don't think any of us understand, we've all offended somebody. You just been
Yeah,
lucky that you didn't offend the wrong person. Because if
yeah,
you mess around in your daily life and you end up offending the wrong person that you're not aware of the following that they have,
right,
they turn
right.
around and out you, your life is now over for an innocent mistake where you just innocently offended somebody. That's what I don't like.
Well, I think that's really the key, though, isn't it, Trinity?
Yeah.
Is that everybody? I mean, if you're watching this, if you're listening to this, whatever, if you've ever accidentally or on purpose offended somebody, just you got to put yourself in the position of anyone who's getting canceled
Yeah.
or getting shunned. Um, I really thought we were moving in a really cool direction of the anti-bullying movement.
Yeah.
I really thought we were moving in a good direction where we looked down upon shunning and we were becoming more inclusive of a society, a more accepting and a more understanding of a society. And maybe when this is all done, that's exactly where we'll end up, Trinity.
Hopefully.
But pendulums do exist. And we see this with every topic we can discuss, where if the pendulum is too far in one direction, and in this case, it must have been, right?
Yeah.
It must have not been a pendulum that was sitting still. It must have been a pendulum that, to a lot of people, they felt like it was way up in one direction. Therefore, the movement to bring it back to center pulled it way too far, because as balanced as we all would like to be, as much as we all could admit that center really is where we should be in probably most everything, right?
Yeah.
That's not what happens when you pull something that's so far in one direction. Unfortunately, the pull, it gains
It
momentum.
overcorrects. Yeah.
Yeah, it overcorrects. Just like if you're in a vehicle and you hit, you're not paying attention for a quick sec, and you're about to go off the road, you might overcorrect and go into the other lane and get
Yeah.
hit. Overcorrecting any situation is a problem, and I don't think we as humans have the ability to when where there's so many of us, to self-correct without going too far. It seems like
Yeah.
the pendulum swinging in the opposite direction too far. It's almost necessary to get back to center. I guess what I'm saying.
Essentially, yeah. We have a
That's what
comment
it
here
seems
from
like.
an Omar. Omar Amador. He says,
What's up, Omar?
we live in the era of self-broadcasting with no consequences to the messenger, but then we want to demonize the editorial line of institutions. What's fair is fair for everyone.
See, and he's a broadcaster. He knows. He's
There you go.
yeah. So he definitely understands. He's a journalist,
Okay.
actually, professional journalist. So he understands.
Yeah, I think, and that's the thing that I don't like, though, is somehow the person who's trying to be reasonable also ends up being the enemy, right?
Right.
Like, for instance, I've seen people who tried to come out for this gentleman to say,
Yeah.
hey, guys, like, what are you doing? We don't know all the facts yet. They
Yeah.
all immediately turn against that person now. And, like,
Yeah.
that person becomes just as evil when they haven't done anything other than just try to be the adult in the room. And that's part of the mob mentality, right? Like, mobs have never been known for their, reasonability.
Ever, right? I mean,
No.
you said it earlier, Trinity. In every movie, in every piece of historical read, it's never been good for everybody to jump to judgment.
No.
Jumping to judgment has never
Never.
ever produced the right result. So what is it we're missing? We're smarter than this. We're better than this. We're more learned than this. We're more educated than this.
You would like to think that, yeah.
Yes, no, I have to think that. I have to believe
Yeah.
that, because there's no way I can believe that we are that freaking stupid
I think,
as a people. You know what I mean? There's no freaking way I can believe that. Here's the issue. I'm sorry, before you
Yeah, go
go,
ahead.
Trent. It's because I think everyone thinks they're on the right side of history and they're on the right side of social norm. I think we have become so entitled, even though we're always pointing that way and saying that person's entitled. I think we all are very entitled. That's how luxurious our lifestyle has been. That's how good the American lifestyle truly has been. Because we're all so freaking entitled and we feel like what I think is or should be
Yeah.
the social norm.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that no, I mean I agree. Obviously, I think that we also we're a very revenge or vengeance motivated society. Like a lot of our movies, are making the other person pay. And
Rambo,
a lot of them do. I mean,
First Blood.
almost every movie that we see is somebody being wronged and then wronging that other person and being giving them payback. And so we are not a society built on acceptance and forgiveness. We're not a
No.
society built on forgiveness, or whatever. Like that's just not how we're wired or what's promoted out there, right? Like on one hand, we say that is an ideal that we should achieve, but yet when you look at everything that we promote and everything we do, like it's just not. When you look at religion, it says turn the other cheek. When you look
Right.
at
Right.
the people in our lifetimes that we look up to and hold up as some sort of a saint or a martyr, they're all very. I mean, Gandhi, he didn't touch
Right.
anybody, didn't hurt anybody, and so we hold these people in high regard. But then we'll turn around and go
Right.
watch a movie about somebody slaughtering an entire village because they, stepped on a shoe or something.
Right.
And so I think that we do have to learn how to have acceptance. We do have to learn how not everything has to be your way. Like sometimes
Right.
we do have to learn to accept it as it is, not as we want it to be. And I don't
Yeah.
think we're very skillful at that. We have to. I look at my kids, right, and my daughter, love her to death, man. But my 15-year-old daughter, we will go. She gets cold a lot, right?
I'm cold now.
Yeah, I'm never cold. She gets cold a lot. But around the house, she refuses to wear like pants or sweatpants or anything. She wears shorts and like skimpy shirts or whatever when she's around the house.
Uh-huh.
And she's always complaining about being cold. I'm like, why don't you just put some clothes on? Well, it's just not comfortable. Whatever. It doesn't make sense to me, right? But we'll go out of the house to go drive somewhere, even if it's just to go to grab a bite of food and come back. She'll bring like a blanket with her.
Mm.
And for me, it's always like, really, like you can't either A, put on clothes, or B, just be mildly uncomfortable for 5 minutes while we go and come back. Like it has to always be comfort. And I think that's part of the entitlement that you're talking about is we always feel like we should be in these little comfort bubbles and should never be offended or challenged. And I think that's what's caused a lot of our heartache is because life is challenging. Life is going to offend you. The first truth of the Four Noble Truths is pain is a part of life. So
Right.
this idea that you can live a life without being offended, without being uncomfortable, without experiencing things that you deem as unacceptable,
Right.
that's a farce. It's never going to happen, and you're going to always feel upset and pissed off if that's your motivation for life because you're never going to accomplish that.
Right.
And that right there, that we all get it, right? We all we all get it on an intellectual level. Not once, right? Because I used to have this question whenever I would teach this in groups, right? I would always, without fail, start the group off like that. I would say, hey, everybody here, what would you guys think? Or what would you say if somebody were to come in right now and say to you, hey, my name is Bob, and for anybody who's named Bob out there, I'm not talking about you. If they were to come in and say, hey, my name is Bob, and I think that my life should be perfect. I
Right.
think that nothing bad should ever happen to me. Nobody should ever tell me no. Nobody should ever cut me off in traffic. I should never get stopped at a stoplight. I should never lose anything. My life should just be perfect. What would you all say? And without fail, everybody in the room would snicker and laugh just a little bit, and they would all say, that person's crazy. That's
Yeah.
insane. That's ridiculous to think. I said, okay, but how many people in here, the first time something doesn't go your way, you get upset and frustrated? And then they all had that aha moment. I was like, exactly. We all know it to be intellectually true, but that's not how we live our lives. We live our lives getting upset and frustrated at everything that doesn't go our way. But yet we'll admit freely that not everything's going to go your way. And
Yeah.
that's our nature. And so we have to kind of understand that concept that, look, dude, not everything's going to go your way. You're going to get offended, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Like it's okay that I go through my life. It's okay that I'm offended that this cancel culture is taking place.
Yeah.
I don't feel the need to stop it because I'm offended. I feel the need to stop it
Right.
just because I don't think it's healthy environment for all of us to
Right.
be in. I don't think it's going to lead to anything good. But if we don't change it, my life goes on. Like I'm not going to be upset in my day to day life because this cancel culture is taking place.
Right.
And that's part of what I mean is It's okay to be offended.
Right. And they're allowed to have their voice.
Yes.
And I think you and I both agree, like all voices do matter. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's good to hear everybody's voice and everybody's opinion. You should never want to silence somebody's voice because, first of all, it reminds me of when I was in those early years of college, right? Rush Limbaugh was a big radio guy, and I was in radio, and I liked radio. So one person that I like to listen to was Howard Stern. The other one is Rush Limbaugh because Rush Limbaugh was so opposite the way I felt, the
Right.
way I thought, the way I felt. I just could not relate to him. But I had learned early on by a really good humanities teacher that listen to those that are very different than you. Understand those that are very different than you or that you disagree with because that's how you learn more. That's
Yeah.
how you learn more about yourself. That's
Yep.
how you learn to navigate, difficult situations in the future. Um, and so I liked listening to him because of that. Because after the initial first times where it got annoying, or it was very annoying, I began to understand the ideology that he was spitting out, and just understood. Okay, I could see how he's getting his following, or how he has his following.
Sure.
They just don't. They must not know this other side. They must never hear this other side. Is what I always
Sure.
thought, right? And I think we have that like times 100 now. If all you
Yeah.
do is just listen to those that you agree with and only follow those that you agree with, then you're harming yourself.
Yeah.
I think you should really make more of an effort of listening to those that have differing opinions, watching things that are maybe a little uncomfortable, like you said. Like allow yourself to be a little uncomfortable. That way, you learn more about yourself. Uh, Being a person in recovery, I think I have an advantage because I was very uncomfortable with almost everything. And I had to learn how to be comfortable in situations because I was being told that even though that situation is uncomfortable now, there's peace and calm on the other side.
Right.
And even though you don't know what that looks like, what it feels like, you don't know how you're going to think, you don't know how you're going to feel, there's no way to paint that picture for you because everybody's unique and different. It was still very interesting. It was like, all right, I'm gonna go through that. But you learn how to constantly analyze how you interpret every situation. How did you interpret what
Right.
that person said? That look that that person gives you. How did you interpret that? Never did a sponsor or anyone of meaning in my life say you're right to feel the way you are about the way that person looked at you. Yeah, 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 yeah. No, that was maybe before, back in the day when we were all
Right.
just being responsible. But once I was around people that we all had the intention of growth and maturity, they would always be like, well, what did that make you feel like? Why did you think that? Well, I thought that he was doing this. Yeah, but that's about you. That's your insecurities. That your fears, your thought process. That has nothing to do with that person.
Yep.
So it was always challenging, and that's what helped me be able to grow. And so when I see this Trinity and when I hear all this stuff, my concern is that it's kind of limiting a lot of. Here's you have a generation that is really intelligent. They have a lot of things at their fingertips, and they have access to so much information. But it's almost too much information because we're not allowing them to grow at a natural, normal pace,
Right.
which is feel uncomfortable, deal with it, learn how the world does not have to adapt to you, but instead the world exists the way it does. It always has. There's always been conflict. There's always been divide. This is nothing new. I know you think that the racial divisions now are brand new. I know you
Yeah.
think that everybody's thinking like this right now because it's brand new. I know you think you're the first generation that ever smoked pot, and that's brand new. None of this is new. Everything has been said.
Yep.
Everything has been thought. Everything has been tried. Everything has been explored, but not by you. You're the new person in the deal.
Yeah.
So move forward, learning from those that you want to be your mentors, but also learning from the ones that are very opposite and different than you, because you always want to be better than you are today. And if you think you're perfect today, and you have everything, and you have all the knowledge you need, and exactly the way you feel about the world is perfect now, and that's the way it is, and you can't be swayed, then I can't help you.
Yeah.
Then you are part of the stupid, and stupid can't be fixed.
No.
And unfortunately, you just need to move aside. And I'm not saying that to be attacking or shameful. I'm saying that because if you choose not to learn and listen, then you are concrete. And there's nothing about concrete that's human. We're only made about this much carbon. The rest of us is water. And because it's water, that means it's malleable. That means we move with the flow, we adapt to every situation, and that means we're constantly changing and ever flowing.
Yeah, I think God, you touched on so much there. I'll say that one of the things that I think of when I think of information is we now have so much information at our fingertips that we forget humility, right? We forget to be humble. We forget to realize that we don't know everything just because we
Yeah.
feel that we have everything in our pockets. Because
Yeah.
what we don't realize, and some of us do it consciously and some of us do it unconsciously, when you go to look up something, you're looking up things to prove your point, right?
Yep.
You have a filter on that you're going to look up that you've
Right.
already kind of
Right.
decided. Now you're looking up for things to back it
Yep.
up. That's called Occam's broom, right? Where you're purposely looking for things to back up your stance, and so the humility of I might have this wrong.
Right.
That I think is what we're missing, right? Very few times do we start out in a conversation thinking, "Hey, I don't know everything. Let me hear it. Let me listen first." No, we hear a tiny little bit, and we made up our mind and we run with it. And I think that's dangerous because, and I keep saying this, it's only fun when you're on the winning team. And in today's culture, it doesn't take much for you to be on the losing team. And at that point, it's too late because the machine you helped create, it's already taken over. And so, you become part of the problem there. Like, for instance, there's a debate I got into many, many, many times with the Joe Paterno situation. So, for those of you who aren't familiar, Joe Paterno was the head coach of the Penn State. There was apparently one of his assistants there, Jerry Sandusky, was inappropriate with kids throughout his tenure there, and apparently what happened is somebody saw something, they took it to Joe Paterno. Joe Paterno heard about it, third party, and then brought it to his superiors, and then let it be what it is. And then his superiors did some investigation. They called the cops, and then it kind of came out, quite some time later. And then, so, the proverbial shit hit the fan. He got arrested, and this whole thing came crashing down. But the public turned on Joe Paterno in such a weird way. They all got so mad at him that the university kind of ousted him, and he ended up dying. And I'm going to say he died of heartbreak because he was at that job for like 50 years or something. It was insane how long he was a coach there. And then they ripped it from him, and then he died, and they made him out to be this horrible, horrible human being, all because they felt. And it's an emotional topic, right? Child
Hmm.
molestation is emotional for everybody. It is literally probably the
Yeah.
worst crime that anybody commit, right? I mean, it is
Right.
right up there above murder, I think, in many people's eyes. And so, rightfully so, people got emotional about it. But that emotion caused you to not have reasonability anymore. And nobody wanted to understand from Joe Paterno's case that here is a person he's known for over 20 years as a friend and doesn't want to believe he would do these things. He didn't see anything with his actual eyeballs. It was told to him. It could be a misinterpretation. It could be, I don't know. I don't, but if he calls the police right then and there and makes that accusation, true or not, that guy's life is ruined forever. And if you don't think so, you're full of it. Because I'm going to tell you right now, as a parent, if I found out that my kids were going to a house that a guy there was accused of child molestation, and even if he was found innocent, I probably won't let my kids there anymore.
Right.
And that might not be right. I don't know. I'm just telling you I'm imperfect, and that's what I would do. There's no reason for me not to let that happen because if it was unfounded, it was all false, it doesn't matter. I would not let my kids over there. And
Right.
so that person's life is ruined. And Joe Paterno didn't want to take this person he's known for 20 years and ruin their whole life over some speculation that he wasn't sure if it was true or not. And he was ousted for that. And I think that is part of the problem is we gotta slow down and pump the brakes, man. We gotta understand that there are two sides. There's interpretations. There's intent. There's so many finite things that are involved in this, and the problem is if you don't care about it when it's somebody else, they're not going to care about it when it's you.
Hmm.
And you got to be aware of that. Like somebody has to take a stand here and do what's right. And I know it's a principle thing. So for me, and I've taken a lot of heat over this over the years, especially here in my own house. Right, my wife is a very emotional person, and she has a very strong sense of right or wrong. And there's been times where even in my own home, there's certain things that have taken place that I don't necessarily agree with, but I'm not ready to throw the hammer until I have all the
Right.
facts. I'm a very much okay, yeah, that doesn't sound good, but let me hear the other side. Let me make sure I understand it all before I start throwing books around. And
Right.
that act alone in this house sometimes has even caused problems
Right.
because they're emotional and rightfully so. But I try to live based upon the principle if I was ever in a situation as a man, as a straight white male, if I was ever accused of something, which let's be honest is not out of the realm of possibility in today's world, I would like to think that I would have my day in court to be able to say, wait a minute, these are unjust, right? And that's not always the case, and that's what worries
Right.
me. Is that dude? I went to my kids' school. This was probably 2 years ago, 3 years ago. I don't know. I used to go to my kids' school when they were younger, elementary, and I would volunteer for lunch, right? And this just gives you an idea of where we're at in times. I was there to help them lunch, and our job basically at that age is basically they'll bring their little milk cartons and you open them up for them, or little things and back. You just open them up. You're basically there just to kind of help them, facilitate the process. I would be there frequently. A lot of the little kids knew who I was. I knew who their friends were and stuff. And there was one day that I was there. I undid somebody's milk, and then I felt something on my hip. I looked down. It was one of the kids giving me a hug. Now, realistically, that should have been a very sweet moment where a little kid was showing his appreciation and gratitude and love and affection for an adult that was being nice and kind to him. My immediate reaction was to throw my hands up like, oh, like I didn't know what to do because I was terrified that, who's looking at this? If I give this kid a hug, am I going to, and realistically, it might not have been a problem, but
Yeah.
it's that 1% that it is a problem that
Yeah.
terrified the hell out of me because
Yeah.
just an accusation can ruin your life. Even
Right.
if it's completely unfounded and there's no run, it doesn't matter. Once again, and that's the problem with the public grabbing a hold of stuff. When they grab a hold of stuff, they all hear the negative, but they don't always hear the positive. They don't hear, oh, this was all made up and it was recanted later on and blah blah blah. They don't hear that, so they're going to still just walk around and think, oh, isn't that the guy that did such and such? No, and so that to me, we all have to keep in mind. There's another instance, and this is a more controversial one, and this was recently. When that stuff happened in, I think it was Charleston. I think it was Charleston. I don't remember now. The whole Nazi thing where the guy just hit the girl with the car. President Trump took insane amounts of heat and called a racist they threw him so far under the bus. I think he's still under it. And all he said was there were good people on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Just that statement alone, then also and that is what I have a problem with, right? Because everybody wants to jump on him and say, "Oh, you're a bad person because you're on that side. You're a Nazi." Well, were you there? Do you know that every single person on that side was a Nazi? First of all, Nazis are gone, guys. I hate to break it to you. They've been gone for a very long time. There's no more Nazis. But my point being is, I also saw the other side of it. There was people there who were anti-Nazi, who were filling balloons with urine and throwing it on people. Those were the good guys. Like that to me is not a good guy behavior. I don't care who you are or what you stand for. If you throw a bag of
Right.
urine on me, we're gonna fight. Like I'm not gonna say, "Oh, you're so justified." No, I'm gonna stomp you.
Yeah.
And so there were good people on that side who felt that the Nazis, supposed Nazis, stood for something bad, and they wanted
Yeah.
to show up and show their disdain. Those are some good people who did that. But there was also some bad people who decided to show up with bags of urine and throw it at other people, which is not right. And on the flip side, yeah, I think there was probably some people there who were legitimate racists who just were bad people and probably shouldn't have been out. But I
Mm-hmm.
also think there were some other people there who maybe were raised with different ideals than I was, had different life experiences than I did, who were ignorant in certain things and had stances that were not fully, recognized. And they felt the need to show up and put their word out there. Now, I don't necessarily agree with them, but I don't think I'm going to change their mind by throwing urine on them. I think I'm going to change their mind by having a conversation and helping them understand the error in their ways or the errors of their thinking. Try to figure out what it is that's causing them to think this way. I don't think they're a bad person. Because I guarantee there's people in their lives that they're excellent to. So just because they have one stance that I disagree with does not erase their behavior for the rest of their lives.
Right.
And that's where we're at. And that's dangerous, man. Because at any moment, dude, any one of us can offend the wrong person.
Right.
And now you're on the other end of the gun.
I had an uncle when I was well, I mean, he's passed away, long since passed away, and I'm not going to mention his name or anything. But back in El Paso, I had one of my uncles that had this strong hatred towards black people, right? And a lot of my friends are black, so I didn't get it. I didn't like it. I didn't understand it. It made me not really like him too much. And he wasn't a close uncle, so I didn't feel a loss from it. But I remember finally asking, my aunt, because I did like her, his wife. And,
Right.
and I asked her, like, why is he so against? She's the blood relative. He wasn't.
Right.
So I asked her, like, what's his big deal with that? And when she explained that they used to have a liquor store in California, and he was pistol whipped several times. He was robbed 3 times, all 3 times by African American people, and pistol whipped very bad and beaten to the point where they moved from California. He had this PTSD from the whole thing and just
Right.
moved from California. Um, and so it gave me a little bit better understanding as to why, in his perspective or in his ideology, um, as much as he felt, you know, uh, that, you know, they as a people weren't an issue. So he put a liquor store in an area of town where that's the majority of the population.
Mm-hmm.
As time moved on, and that happened to him over and over again, I think he felt unappreciated or unliked by that same population. And his way of dealing with it was to say, they must all be like that.
Right.
So he had this PTSD untreated. So he didn't have the same experiences that I did. My experiences were very different. I looked up
Sure.
to Dr. J. I grew up in a different generation where we kind of, played ball together, had fun together. It was very, together. Obviously I'm an '80s kid, so everything was already together by that point.
Sure.
He grew up in a very different generation. So I say this because even when I hear of people that are, whether they're Klansmen or whether they're not supposed Nazis like you're talking about,
Right.
I can't throw hate on them. I don't disagree. I don't agree with them, but I don't know their story. And every time I hear that, and the reason I say that is because of that one uncle, because I can't be mad at somebody who went through some sort of experience that's that personal and painful, and they unfortunately are just overgeneralizing because it's untreated. It's just
Exactly.
untreated pain. It's
Yeah.
untreated trauma. And I know that in the right circumstances, with the right understanding, with the right influences, that can change.
Well, how
But
big of a bag of urine
it's
is it going
never
to
going
take?
to change if you try to force feed it and you start living out some of the biasness. In other words, if a KKK Klansman kind of person continues to spew out verbal hate or do bad things like hanging a person or laughing at the idea of somebody
Right.
that gets hanged or making inappropriate humor or posting that kind of thing, then you're like, wow, shame on you, man, because
Yeah.
you're just really not even listening.
Yeah. And those
But
people exist.
those people exist, but those are the people on the outside.
Yeah. They're not the norm.
Understand, they're never ever once again going to be the norm. So we don't have to run in fear and be all so anxious and be all so fanatical and crazy, because that little segment of the population will continue to die off as long as we don't feed that population with valid proof that they're on the right.
Yep.
And unfortunately, when we, as Latinos or Black people or whatever, people of color or minority, if we go and start living out anything that is a stereotype and just force feeding people that are helping us, right? Like there's people like you that are very aware. You and I are partners in business and in so many other things. You don't judge me differently. You don't treat me differently because I'm a Latino.
My kids are half Spanish.
Exactly. There's more of you. In other words, there's more
Yeah.
of you than the Klansman we were just talking about.
Exactly.
But if I would overgeneralize who you are, Trinity, because of that person over there, then I'm missing out on the opportunity with you. Plus, I'm probably pushing you closer
Yeah.
to the ideology that those fanatics have,
Well, of course.
rather than staying on my side, which is where you are.
Well-
Well, not my side, but staying on the
Sure.
side of
Of
what I
course.
believe is
The just
the
side.
norm.
Yeah.
The norm.
Well, the other thing that I think is interesting, right, to show kind of where we're at as a society. So, I think we both have said it here on this show and other shows before. No other group has more of a right to complain and be upset right now than women, because they've been abused and hurt and ridiculed and put down
Still.
by universally everybody, right? Men, other women, other cultures, other. I mean, look around the world right now. That is the one group that is still, it's okay to be mean to, apparently.
Yep.
And so much to the point, like I said, I was watching this documentary thing where I'm in the middle of it, and they were talking about like the East Area rapist, right? And I was shocked to look at some of the news stories that they're showing, like the clips that they're showing from that era, on just how nonchalant society at that point took rape against women. Like there was literally men who raped multiple women that were getting 30 days probation. Like it was insane on how much nobody cared. Like it really was just like, whatever, she'll be fine. So we come such a long way from that, right? In women's rights and things of that nature. And so we spent so much time and effort and energy teaching our women to speak up and have a voice. To your voice matters, be heard. If you feel wronged or if you feel violated, you need to step up and say something about it and stand your ground, right? And then we look at today's world and there's this phenomenon that's happening called Karen, right? Any woman who sees anything unjust or anything that she doesn't agree with and decides to step up and say something about it, she's immediately labeled as a Karen, which for those of you who aren't aware, that's a derogatory term usually held towards the white woman. It's the white woman who wants to speak to the manager kind of a thing. And yes, I think and sometimes it can be a bit excessive. However, the principle of they are trying to do what we've told them to do and take advantage of your voice and speak up, and now we're ridiculing them for it.
Yeah.
You know, we can't have it both ways, guys. Like, it's just impossible. And I think this mob mentality is just going to end badly for a lot of people. I mean, it already is. Look around, dude. We're not winning. Like, it's happening poorly for so many right now. And we're all guilty of it to an extent, right? Some worse than others, but we're all guilty of looking at a situation and having an immediate feeling. And thankfully, a lot of us, we understand that immediate feeling and we follow that up with investigation and logic and reasoning and things of that nature. But too many of us take that immediate feeling and we run with it. And that is the problem. Like, if you're guilty of that, you're not a bad person, but you need to look inward and you need to stop allowing your emotions to govern your behavior all the time. You have to stop and say, wait a minute, man. How would I feel if I was in that shoe? You know,
Yeah.
there's so many, this idea that you're not even allowed to defend yourself, right? Like if I, like when they were saying the Nazis talking, like, well, he shouldn't be giving them talk. You shouldn't be allowed to speak. Mind you, he didn't do anything illegal. He literally just has an opinion that differs from your own. Think of it in those terms. So what happens if the entire world just shifted and they no longer agree with you and you weren't even allowed to talk about it anymore?
Dude,
how
can
would
you
you
imagine?
feel?
Yeah, can you imagine if free speech was truly over?
Exactly.
I mean, dude, we don't know that. We don't know how it would be. We in today's society have no idea of what the lack of free speech really is, or what truly edited speech really is, or government censoring everything that's out there. That you don't want that.
No.
Forgiveness is not even accepted anymore. Trinity, I mean, look at the way some people are being ridiculed for something they did 40, 50 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 1 year ago. I mean, how many comedians are being ridiculed for jokes they made in years past? You were talking about Jimmy Kimmel before we got on the air. I mean, Jimmy Kimmel has been, carrying the flag for the left during this entire Trump administration, and yet now he's getting ridiculed by his own, by his own people, because he at one time dressed I'm not going to call it blackface, Trinity. I'm going to call it he was doing impersonations. He was and when you're doing impersonations and they happen to be black characters, of course you're going to put black makeup on to look more like the character.
It was funny. I watched it. It was funny.
Yeah, he was doing humor. He was doing comedy. He wasn't attacking, doing something negative to a culture or a people. He wasn't insulting to a culture, to a people. His intent wasn't wrong. His intent was to make you laugh, not to do blackface. Blackface is very different than that. And so I just think it's very sad that we are just so easily offended by everything, and then we never allow someone to explain their side or even to look at it like there could be another explanation, and that might make it okay for that time period. Remember, you have a 2020 lens on. You can't put a 2020 lens and make comments and judgment in the 1800s, early 1900s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, not even the year 2019. This is 2020. You can only look at things in 2020 with a 2020 lens so that we move forward.
Yeah.
You may have some thoughts from the days past, but remember, those lenses are always different. The way we felt about any type of people yesterday is different today depending on what happened later today. If something would happen today where, let's say, somebody from Sweden, you know, blew up some government buildings, and they say that there's a Swedish army that's going to blow up a government building, we will probably see Swedish hate
Yeah.
stuff from today forward.
Yeah.
That's just the way it would be, even though there's never been that kind of rhetoric before.
Yeah.
That's kind of the way it is, man. And I don't see that changing.
Well, we're in such a
perspective.
We're in such and I've said this ad nauseum in my life to so many different people, and I think it bears repeating at this moment. You can be right or you can be happy.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And we're so focused on being right, and what we don't realize is that's an exhausting lifestyle because there's always another right. There's always another one. And so you're right. Yes, that was offensive to some people. You're right. That was distasteful. You're right. That was this, that, the other. You're right. 100%. But if you don't let it go and forgive it, you're never going to be happy. And that's the thing. Is I personally choose to be happy.
Yeah.
I used to want to be right. And so I would take that power. If somebody was wrong and I got them on it, heck yeah, man, I'd hammer that home. You're wrong, blah, blah, blah. But what I realized is I was so pissed off and agitated all the time, and I was always looking for the next right. I needed that next situation to prove somebody that they were wrong and hold it over them and be like, yeah, you're right. I told you. I got you. You're wrong.
Right.
And I was miserable. It wasn't until I learned how to forgive that I was happy. Like, yeah, you're right. 100%, you're right. But I'm going to choose to forgive you because things happen, man. Yeah. I'm not as concerned with being right anymore. I want to be happy. And you know what? The happiness comes with forgiveness. Forgiveness is for me. It's not for you. The people I've forgiven in my life are not walking around all day long thinking, oh man, my back hurts, and I forgave them. Like, oh, my back doesn't hurt. No, half of them don't even know. Forgiveness is for me. So this idea that, they haven't earned my forgiveness, they don't deserve my forgiveness, you're not giving it to them. You're giving it to yourself. So you don't have to walk around with that crap anymore. Forgive them, man. It is what it is. Mistakes happen. Stop judging people off their worst moments. Stop taking a snapshot. It's like when my kids, I'd pick them up from school and I'd ask them, like, how was your day? And they'd be like, oh, my day was bad. And they would proceed to tell me about this one tiny interaction for about 8 seconds that they had. And I would tell them, like, so wait a minute. It doesn't sound like your entire day was bad. It sounded like you had a bad moment. But it sounded like your day was pretty good. Well, that's the same thing with us, man. Stop taking one thing that somebody said or did, and then that now defines their entire existence in the world, and it's up to you to hold it over them forever because you're right. No, man. Like, just be happy. Yeah. You don't always have to be right. Be happy. Richard just made a comment. I'm just ready for others to be right more often. Sure. Well, then we get into who defines what is right. And that's the problem. Because what's right for one is not right for the other.
And that's okay.
And it is okay. What's not okay is to try to bully that person into thinking the way you think.
That's okay. It's just understand that everybody's hypocritical. Yep. Everybody's biased.
Actually, this is our last few minutes, so go ahead and take this is your wrap up.
All right. Well, if we would just understand that every one of us have a level of hypocrisy, some of us greater than others. Every one of us have bias within us, some of us greater than others. But to walk around and take all the world's problems and all the problems that individuals have as a people, and it needs to be fixed. If you put all that on your shoulders, that's a huge burden to have on your shoulders. You don't have that big of shoulders. You don't have that strong of shoulders. And it's not your burden to bear. You're bearing a burden of other people. So no wonder some of you are walking around feeling like, I must feel guiltier than I am. I must feel shame for not only who I am, but who my parents were and who my grandparents were, because you're carrying like all these generations of burden around. That's not yours to carry. Don't accept it. You're a good person. If you're a loving person and you believe in inclusivity, that includes everybody. That includes people that you disagree with. If you're a person that believes in love instead of hate, then that includes everybody, even then those that disagree with you. A matter of fact, You should even make them more, you should allow them to be more inclusive in your life. You should give more love to them than you do before. Look, if their intent wasn't to harm you, then that's on you that you were felt harmed. If your intent was not to hurt them and they did feel hurt, then that's on them that they felt hurt. Stop putting all the weight on you and making everything your fault. Stop having to cancel people. This boycotting thing, I've never liked boycotting anyway, because, and I'll tell you why. Because if I boycotted every business that at some point the CEO or the business or the founders or the people making the most money from the business were doing something negative towards Hispanics or to women or to somebody, then I wouldn't eat. I wouldn't eat. I wouldn't exist. I wouldn't be dressed. I'd have to live out in a farm somewhere and just do it all on my own. Because I guarantee you, with the right investigative reporting, every company that makes everything, including a $5 shirt that you're wearing right now, offended somebody to get it. So what would you be doing if you canceled everybody? What, you're just going to pick and choose who you cancel? Or are you just going to cancel those that, someone else said, let's cancel. So you just, yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. I'm not a moo cow. I don't need a moo for you. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to be an individual and I'm going to remember the principles, like Trinity said, that I feel like I was raised with that were good. Not everything that we learned in the past is bad. Younger generations, just because we're older doesn't mean everything we think is old, archaic, and not necessary in today's world. A lot of it is valid. And a lot of it is like this. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. I'm going to use that forever. And also, I forgive you and love you because that's the right thing to do. I don't care whether you enjoy it, like it, give it in return. You don't have to respect me in return. I don't do it for you, like Trinity said. And with that being said, I appreciate it, and you might cancel me now. Okay. Bye-bye. Bye, Felicia.
Right? Yeah, and here's my $5 shirt. It's actually a WPSN shirt. Haha, there you
I
go.
think
And
it's
it wasn't
$7.99.
and it wasn't $5 either. Yeah, so we're gonna do. This is our wrap up for those of you who are just tuning in. We're done with the actual Dharma Time show. I'm gonna do my little tips, and then we'll do a outro, and we'll stick around for a few minutes afterwards, just to kind of talk and answer questions, things of that nature. As always, feel free to follow us on social media. He is at the Dope Doctor. I am at the Dharma Guy. We are at WPSN99. We're also at Now Matters More. Feel free to share, follow, like, subscribe, all that stuff. It actually does help us. It helps algorithms. It helps get the word out there to other people. So, having said that, I guess my final tips here. I'm gonna keep it pretty simple and pretty straightforward, man. First and foremost, number one, have the right understanding, and what I mean by that is understand that in any given situation, you're going to bring your own biases, your own experiences into it, and you're going to have an emotional response to that. But also understand that not everybody else has that same emotional response. Not everybody else has the same experiences, the same insight that you do. And it doesn't mean yours is any better or worse, it just means yours is different. And understand that you're also going to live in a world where offenses and things of that nature are going to happen. It's just a part of life, and that's okay. We just got to work out a way of skillfully handling that to where we don't cause suffering for ourselves or for other people. The second thing I would say is having empathy. And empathy doesn't mean you have it with just the people that it's easy, that you agree with, that you see their side. You also have to have empathy for everybody. You have to have empathy for that person who wronged you. You have to have empathy for that person who has gone through so many painful things in their life that they didn't know what to do with it and they took it out on you. Yeah, even that person. You got to have empathy for that person because they're struggling and they're dealing with things. Nobody is having a wonderful, amazing, just fantastic life and then he just decides one day to be mean to you. No, that means they're dealing with something. They took it out on you. You're right. They should never have done that, but they did. And that leads me to my third part is while you're having that empathy, why don't you throw in some forgiveness in there as well? Forgive people for being people. Forgive somebody for not being perfect. Because last I checked, neither are you. We're all guilty of doing something imperfect. We're all guilty of having an unskillful day, an unskillful moment. We're all guilty of hurting somebody around us unintentionally or even sometimes intentionally. Forgiveness, man. It's a powerful thing. It's not for losers. There's a lot of strength and showing somebody mercy, right? There's a lot of strength in being able to drop the hammer on somebody, but choosing to not because they're a good person deep down. They just had a bad moment, so I'm going to forgive them. There's a lot of strength in that. Some might say it's even more strong than just dropping a hammer on someone. So I encourage you to think about that. In today's world, it's so easy to cancel somebody. It's so easy to try just join up with the mob mentality and completely trash somebody who doesn't agree with you. And in that moment, it might even feel good for you. But in the long run, it's not going to feel good, especially if stories start to come out to where you see the real damage that you did with that. So let's just not do it in the first place. Let's try to fight for what is actually right. Let's fight for principles. So, anyways, that's all we have for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you share this if you think somebody can get some value. Once again, follow us, all those wonderful things. After the outro here, we're going to stick around on Facebook if you guys want to kind of hang around and ask some questions or make some comments. Until then, now that you know better, do better. Peace. Are you still here? What are you doing? I told you, go do better.